Cortona, Monument, Memory, and Power. This project reconstructs Lorsnell's 21-minute photographic walk through the MAEC Museum. It calibrates the images conservatively, reads the museum labels as evidence, adds outside research, and then tests a carefully limited comparison with Garden Creek in western North Carolina. The archive contains 141 JPEG photographs. Embedded times run from 5:55 to 6:16 in the evening on July 14, 2026. All files report the same camera model, and the GPS coordinates occupy a footprint of only about 40 by 34 meters. The set is therefore a coherent museum walk, not a mixed album. Every photograph contains a GPS record. The first and last points, together with the tightly overlapping intermediate points, keep the route within the museum complex around Piazza Signorelli. GPS cannot identify an artifact, but it strongly supports sequence continuity and helps distinguish this visit from unrelated photographs. Calibration was deliberately conservative, rotation was normalized, white balance was corrected only within kept limits, local contrast was raised gently, and light sharpening improved label and object edges. Nothing was generated, erased, replaced, or geometrically reconstructed. The originals remain the evidentiary masters. Every conclusion is graded. Documented claims are visible in photographs, labels, metadata, or authoritative sources. Inferences are reasoned but not explicit. Comparative claims identify organizational parallels without claiming shared origin. Missing or uncertain material is labeled instead of silently supplied. The route begins with early tools, graves, settlement, and geology. It moves into the Soto tumuli and their gold-rich funerary world, passes through circular cemeteries and repeated burial use, reaches the elite bronzes and banquet equipment of Trestina and Fabres, and closes with territory and Pleistocene fauna. The central synthesis is that power at Cortona was not simply possessed, it was performed and remembered. Earth and stone enlarge the presence of the dead. Gold, weapons, bronzes, and imported vessel forms materialized access to distant networks. Funeral display, drinking, sacrifice, and procession turned objects into public acts. Chapter 1 begins before the Etruscans. The museum roots elite history in geology, environment, movement, burial, and settlement. This long view prevents the later tumuli from appearing suddenly or without local foundations. The Valdichiana repeatedly changed. Marine and continental deposits were followed by alluvial processes and historic reclamation. These shifts shaped wetlands, travel, agriculture, and visibility. The later Etruscan tomb landscape must be understood within this environmental history. The closing cases contain large bones, antlers, teeth, and faunal remains. They establish an ecological archive much older than the city. The presentation is conceptually important. Human monumentality is one episode inside a far longer history of climate and habitat. The earliest population panels trace a dispersed sequence from stone technology through copper and Bronze Age metal. The important point is cumulative. The Etruscan city occupied a territory already mapped by movement, resource use, burial, and memory. At Bottifill, a trench burial combined the body with copper axes, a dagger, a flint arrowhead, and pottery. This is a much earlier social use of metal and burial equipment. It provides a deep chronological foundation for the later Etruscan grammar of rank and remembrance. Fossa del Lupo shifts attention from burial to residence. Architectural terracottas, bucro, a well, and a quadrangular building show that elite display also operated in occupied space. The tombs made authority durable, residences made it present in daily life. At S. Martino alla Rota, cinerary vessels and wine equipment connect the tomb to repeated acts of hospitality and commemoration. The museum sequence therefore introduces banquet symbolism before the major Trestina displays. These ceramics and carved architectural elements show craft moving across domestic, mortuary, and public contexts. The same society that shaped vessels and images also shaped the city and its funerary approaches. The Soto chapter is the core of the photo walk. The museum brings together plans, grave goods, gold ornaments, sculpture, and repeated burial histories from the two monumental tumuli and surrounding circles. At Soto, the dead were placed within a designed landscape. The mounds, stone drums, corridors, chambers, altar, and burial circles controlled how visitors approached and remembered elite ancestors. Tumulus 1 was already monumental around 580 BCE. Its chamber, corridor, stone construction, and later reuse show that monumentality is a process. Each return to the tomb renewed the relationship between living groups and the ancestral place. Tumulus 2 combined two burial episodes with an Eastern ritual fade. This is more than a tomb, it is an integrated complex in which bodies, offerings, movement, sculpture, and the visible hill of Cortona were made to interact. Tomb 1 used a corridor, threshold, and 7 chambers to organize access. The architecture did not merely contain burials, it produced a progression from outside to inside and from public ceremony to restricted ancestral space. The gold fibula is a small object with a large social field. Its panther body, feline terminal, gold wire, and granulation connected clothing, bodily display, craft expertise, and elite patronage. It was portable rank. The fibula combines the panther with the tree of life. MAC interprets the imagery through force, protection, prestige, regeneration, and continuity. The object's minute technical labor is part of its authority. Difficult craftsmanship made symbolic claims tangible. Tomb 2, around 480 to 460 BC, combines jewelry, perfumes, bronze vessels, weapons, furniture fittings, and a stylus with Hercules. The burial assembles several identities at once: adorned person, warrior, host, office holder, and participant in literate culture. The weapons and folding stools make the burial political as well as funerary. The deceased was represented as someone who could fight, preside, host, write, and occupy an office. The tomb compressed those claims into a durable ancestral image. The Soto assemblages repeatedly include vessels for holding, mixing, pouring, serving, and drinking. Together they describe social actions. The power of the host lies in controlling circulation of wine, food, gifts, people, and memory. The altar is the strongest evidence that funerary architecture was performative. MAC describes a stair, upper platform, sculptural groups, the laying out of the body, and offerings to gods and ancestors. Burial was enacted before it was sealed away. Soto operates across scales. The fibula shaped the body, the corridor and chamber shaped access, the tumulus and altar shaped the landscape. Together they made elite identity visible, memorable, and repeatable. The burial circles broaden the story beyond a few princely tombs. 15 intact graves in Circle 2, plus other circles and later insertions, show how community, gendered work, cremation, wealth, and memory varied around the monumental core. Circle 2 preserves 15 intact tombs. The graves are smaller than the great tumuli, but their grouping created a bounded community of the dead. Cremation containers, smaller vessels, bucro, and decorated pottery reveal shared roles with individual variation. The museum distinguishes weapons in male burials and spindle equipment in female burials. These are meaningful patterns, but they should not be mistaken for complete lives. Grave goods are selective, they show what survivors chose to emphasize. Tomb 6 is important because it teaches evidence control. Robbery is not a blank, it is an event that changes the assemblage. Portable valuables disappear first, leaving a distorted picture of identity and wealth. Tombs 2 and 2 bis combine central placement, rich pottery, female identification, winged horse imagery, and later Roman reuse. The grave was not a single event, it remained a place where later communities negotiated proximity to an older sacred landscape. Cremation reorganized the body. Bone fragments were selected and placed within ceramic containers, then surrounded by vessels and objects. The burial became a carefully assembled material person, connected through stele and goods to broader central Italian networks. The later sarcophagi and Hellenistic urns show that the tumulus remained active. Reuse was not accidental clutter. Each insertion interpreted the past and created a claim to ancestral place. The Camusa relief makes mourning visible through 8 repeated kneeling women. Grief is not shown as private spontaneity but as ordered gesture. Like the altar, the relief turns funeral action into an image that can outlast the ceremony. The final major archaeological group shifts from Cortona's tomb landscape to elite assemblages from the Upper Tiber area. The objects reveal extraordinary bronze technology and a social world organized through meat, wine, horses, display, and exchange. Trieste and Fabris are famous for their bronzes, but their early discovery histories are imperfect. Scholarship has re-evaluated Trieste from a supposed hoard or sanctuary deposit toward an assemblage resembling princely tomb equipment. The uncertainty remains part of the evidence. These assemblages require archaeological humility. Museum cases, old inventories, photographs, and technical parallels can reconstruct much, but not every association. The goal is to identify confidence levels rather than force a false completeness. The bronzes combine hammered sheet, cast attachments, complex joints, animal protomes, and in some cases inlay. Technical difficulty was not hidden, it made elite access to labor, knowledge, and distant styles visible. Animal-headed cauldrons and tripods connected local elite practice to a broad Mediterranean prestige vocabulary. The point is not simple foreign copying. Local authority was strengthened by controlling and reworking distant forms. The fire dog brings the banquet back to labor and fire. Before wine was poured, animals were killed, meat was cut, heat was controlled, and portions were distributed. The decorated support made this practical sequence part of elite spectacle. Wine service is a system, not one cup. Mixing, filtering, pouring, and drinking distribute people into roles: host, server, guest, ally, and spectator. The equipment made those relationships visible and repeatable. Horse gear and weapons extend the banquet beyond the dining place. The elite person was imagined as mobile, armed, and capable of gathering others. Procession, hunting, conflict, sacrifice, and hospitality formed a connected political repertoire. Fabris presents a paradox. Rank is strongly signaled by equipment, but the body and some personal ornaments are absent. The museum uses regional comparison to interpret the grave while keeping the biological evidence incomplete. Taken together, the fire dog, vessels, stands, horse equipment, weapons, and grave contexts reconstruct more than wealth. They reconstruct statecraft at the scale of a gathering. Prepare, display, distribute, bind, and remember. The comparison chapter does not claim contact or shared ancestry. It asks a narrower archaeological question: how did different communities use architecture, earth, stone, burial, gathering, and valued materials to make memory durable? Cortona and Garden Creek are separated by more than a millennium and by different continents, histories, and materials. A responsible comparison begins there. Formal resemblance cannot carry a contact claim. The strongest parallel is transformation. At Cortona, restricted chambers were enveloped by an artificial hill. At Garden Creek, connected earth lodges were covered and rebuilt into a platform mound. Different practices produced the same analytical result. Architecture became durable memory. Both sites have long biographies. Soto was reused by later families and periods. Garden Creek transformed lodges into a mound with summit buildings and burials. The shared category is repeated return to a place where civic, ceremonial, and mortuary meanings overlapped. The strongest spatial comparison concerns choreography. Soto directed approach to an altar and chambers. Garden Creek directed access through connected lodges and later onto a ramped platform. Architecture organized participation, but the rituals were not the same. Cortona and Garden Creek both converted long-distance relationships into local ceremonial value. Gold and bronzes are not equivalent to copper, mica, and shell, but each set made distant networks present within a local gathering and monument. The comparison ends with a boundary. These are distinct histories. There is no evidence here for direct contact, common ethnicity, or diffusion. The value lies in comparing how separate societies solved the broad human problem of making authority and memory durable. This matrix keeps the parallel categories and decisive differences in the same view. The useful comparison concerns monument, memory, performance, and networks. The conclusions remain local: Etruscan aristocratic formation in one case, indigenous Appalachian ceremonial and civic traditions in the other. The photo walk is exceptionally strong for the Soto tumuli, gold fibula, burial circles, commusa relief, Entrestine and Fabres bronzes. It does not clearly include the bronze chandelier, tabula cortonensis, or Coulson's and Selvens figures. Those absences are reported rather than filled with unrelated internet images. A second pass should use a consistent object label context sequence. The most important targets are Coulson's and Selvens, the bronze chandelier, the tabula cortonensis, and the outdoor Soto altar. Multiple sides, inscriptions, mounts, scale, and landscape relation would make the next archive far more scientifically useful. The photo walk establishes a coherent story of memory at Cortona. Portable gold shaped the body, chambers and corridors shaped access, tumuli and altars shaped landscape, and banquet equipment shaped political gathering. Garden Creek offers a serious structural comparison in monument making, but not evidence of contact. The MAC official pages provide the controlling interpretation for the altar. Tomb 1, gold fibula, gallery organization, and location of major objects. Museum labels in Lorisnell's photographs at object level context. The Garden Creek comparison is grounded in university and state sources. The Trestina interpretation uses a scholarly review of the major publication on the assemblages. These sources support a structural comparison while preserving cultural difference. The deliverables preserve a clear chain from original archive to calibrated derivatives, slideshow, video, and research narrative. The video uses synthetic narration and no copyrighted background music. The appendix shows every calibrated photograph in sequence. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record. Appendix contact sheet. The numbered frames preserve the complete calibrated sequence so that the narrative selections can be checked against the full photographic record.